In order to be successful with the vocabulary this year, students really need to have a sense of what a noun's function in a sentence is, as well as an adjectives, adverbs, and a verbs. So it's good to review the parts of speech and how they kind of work in a sentence, so that as you're trying to use vocabulary words, if you need to use a verb, you know how to use it as a verb. So we're going to start with nouns. Nouns refer to a person, place, thing, or idea. So an example of a person would be Bob, maybe student. A place, high school. A thing, a dog. An idea would be something like freedom. So I always begin by asking how many of these questions you can answer. And we're not going to go into great detail with these since we just really need to know how a noun works. But you should know the difference between a common and a proper noun. A common noun is something that is general, like the word student, like the word dog. A proper noun is always going to be capitalized. So our example before Bob, if we want to get specific with a high school, we could say Red Jacket High School. What is an example of a singular noun and a plural noun? We should know the difference by now between singular and plural words. So singular always refers to one. So we could have sandwich. But what if I want 2 sandwiches? This is what we would mean by plural. Now there are so many rules for the spelling of plural nouns. The best place to check for this is always the dictionary if you're not sure. Because a word like child, if we have just one, does not become childs. It would become children. But the dictionary tells us all of this information, so that is one of the best resources for questions about singular or plural nouns, spelling, and how they change. How are possessive nouns formed? Well, this is where you add an apostrophe S or an S apostrophe. And again, it depends on what words you start with. So we could say the dog's bone. This would be one dog. But what if we had 2 dogs? The dog's bones. The apostrophe goes after the S. And then if you have a word like children, if something belongs to the children, in this case, since it does not end with an S, we would add an apostrophe S on the end. So there are a lot of rules with possessive nouns, and again, dictionaries would be helpful with that. What is an abstract noun? This differs from a concrete noun. An abstract noun is something that involves maybe feelings, ideas, and concepts. Things that are not concrete, things that are considered immaterial. So some examples of this might be bravery, which is kind of a feeling or an idea, kindness, beauty. Something to remember is that words are often born into a certain part of speech, but the moment the word is used a different way in a sentence, it becomes something else. So here we have 2 examples, and we need to determine which of these examples the word bird is being used as a noun. The loud chirping of the bird woke me, or my brother was acting like a bird brain. So what do we do if we're not sure? Bird is spelled the same, it looks the same in both sentences. So how would we know? I'm going to give you some tips on how to determine if something's being used as a noun. So the first tip is to look for article adjectives, a, an, and the. They are also known as noun markers because they mark a noun. This will not work with proper nouns. So if you think back to the previous slide, you had the bird, and you also had a bird in the second example. So this really wouldn't help us too much. So we would need to go on to the next set of tips. And why doesn't this work with proper nouns? Think if you had a sentence or a phrase like the Mr. Jones. It sounds very awkward. So this usually does not work with nouns that are capitalized or nouns we would call proper nouns. Okay, so let's think back to the bird example. We have the and a, so that doesn't help us. Number 2, look at the word that follows the suspected noun. If there is not one, there's a good bet your suspect is a noun. If there is another word, like brain, in the second example, the suspect is being used as an adjective. The word bird describes the brain. So in the second sentence, the one on the right, we have instead an adjective. Tip number 3, look at the word's suffix. Here is a list of common noun endings. This is going to be particularly helpful in the vocabulary that we work with this year. On our word list lists, you'll have different words that have these endings, and you'll know to use them as nouns. They will be referred to as nouns. On the unit assignments, when we change certain words from verbs to adjectives or adjectives to adverbs and things to nouns, these suffixes these are what we will use when we're using nouns. So let me give you just a few examples. Plantation. And this could be any variation on this too. An S-I-O-N, a C-I-O-N would work the same way at the end of a word. You have charity, patience, socialism, government, happiness. And you can probably think of a lot of other words that have these suffixes, and think about how these words would be used in sentences, and you'll see that they are in fact used as nouns. So I'm not going to go into any great detail here, but there are many different ways that nouns can be used in a sentence in many different locations. So subjects typically are what people will be most familiar with. They come before the verb. Kayla is the subject of the sentence. She's the one doing the running. You can also have nouns at the end, something that receives the action. This tells us what was needed. In this case, the evidence. You can also have a noun in the position of what's called an indirect object, receiving the action indirectly. So he told the news, and he told it to Maggie. Here you have an example of what's called a linking verb. We are connecting the word Donna to president. They are in fact the same person. So president is a noun here that's known as what's called a predicate nominative. You also have a prepositional phrase. Shower, in this case, is what we would call the object of the preposition, the noun that comes at the end. So think about all of the things we've gone through. A noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. Tips for recognizing nouns. Remember, you're looking for noun markers. Sometimes that a, and the will be helpful. With proper nouns, it's not always going to be the case, but with the common nouns, that will be helpful. Look at the suffixes of the words. Look even in the word evidence here, we have an E-N-C-E. E-N-T here is another common ending. E-R and O-R. Okay, another word like actor would be a person or a thing. So look at the suffixes that come at the end. And also look to see if anything follows what we think might be a noun. And if you look, you will see that there are no other nouns that follow what we've marked as nouns in those particular examples.